There were some bits of muscle tussle that I didn't mind, but generally I didn't love this cartoon. This is a Warner Brothers cartoon from 1953. It's directed by Robert McKimson and written by Ted Pierce. And we have Mel Blanc voicing Daffy Duck and this other very strong duck, who I'll talk about in a moment, and we have Gladys Holland voicing Melissa Duck, who is Daffy Duck's girlfriend, and she is so annoying. I don't like the design of her. I don't like the voice of her. I did not care for that character at all. I also didn't care for the muscly duck either, but I think we're not meant to. Daffy and Melissa Duck are at the beach and everything's going fine, and then Melissa Duck spies this very tall, muscly, strong duck. And she suddenly looks at Daffy and thinks that he's kind of weedy and not very strong, and she suddenly has eyes for this hunky duck. So Daffy decides to try and prove that he's stronger and better than this muscly duck, and this swindler convinces him that he can lift 5,000 pounds on the barbell. And I won't say exactly how he manages to convince him this, but it worked well. I thought it was a pretty clever tactic. And for the rest of the cartoon, it's Daffy trying to prove that he is stronger than the other duck. And we, the viewer, know that that's just impossible. Daffy is oblivious. And the narrative itself as a concept is okay, but I think because a lot of the characters were really irritating, it just meant that it was really unpleasant to watch, and I just didn't particularly like it. There were a few bits here and there with things that Daffy was trying that I thought were okay, but generally speaking, I just didn't care for it. It didn't do anything for me. It's well animated. Apart from the design of Melissa Duck, I really just don't like it at all. But generally, it's well animated. It's consistent in its style. The only thing that I think was it didn't work well for me. In fact, I'll discuss that in a moment because it's a bit of a spoiler. But generally, I really didn't like it, and the way it ended, I thought was just ridiculous as well. So, a spoiler from now, I'm going to discuss what happens at the end, and it makes zero sense. And I'm not saying these cartoons need to make perfect sense, but it literally is the exact opposite of what should have happened. At the end, Daffy obviously shows that he can lift these 5,000 pound weights, and we know that it kind of flings him a bit into the air because they're balloons. And then the hunky duck does the same, and it flings him really far into the air, much further than Daffy. But that's the exact opposite of what should have happened. The hunky muscly duck weighs so much more than Daffy because of his muscle, so the balloons shouldn't have lifted him at all, or at least nowhere near as much as it should have done Daffy. To really illustrate the point, the balloons should have lifted Daffy off the ground because he's just skin and bone and all weedy. So they kind of got it completely backwards, and it kind of didn't illustrate their point at all. It did the exact opposite. So it's just a tiny thing, but it really bugged me because it was just incorrect, and they could have kept the gag by lifting Daffy higher into the air. Then it would have made sense, and it would have been correct, and the joke would have still worked. But never mind. That aside, even with that aside, I didn't love Muscle Tussle. It's definitely not my favourite.